The crystalline spires of Zoreth Prime reflected the twin suns like jagged mirrors, casting prismatic shadows across the royal hangar bay. Princess Elsa of the Zorathian Empire stood with her arms crossed, her bioluminescent skin flickering in patterns that any Zorathian would recognize as pure defiance. Her silvery hair, woven with neural conductive filaments, sparked with barely contained frustration. "Another one," she demanded, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones characteristic of her species. "How many master engineers must fail before the Council accepts reality?" High Chancellor Vexnar, his four arms gesturing in diplomatic supplication, maintained his composure despite the princess's legendary temper. "Your Highness, the Stellar Wraith is the most advanced starfighter in the known galaxies. It requires a pilot of exceptional—" "I am exceptional," Elsa interrupted, her skin flashing crimson. "What I lack is a mechanic who understands that this ship is not meant to be tamed. It's meant to be partnered with." The Stellar Wraith sat in the center of the hangar, a sleek predator of a machine. Its hull was composed of living metal, a Zorathian innovation that could adapt and reshape itself mid-flight. Quantum processors networked through every surface, creating a neural interface so complex that it bordered on sentience. 7 of the Empire's finest engineers had attempted to calibrate the ship systems to Elsa's neural pattern. 7 had failed, and 3 had suffered permanent psychological damage from the feedback loop. The princess was the Empire's greatest pilot and its greatest problem. Brilliant, reckless, and utterly unwilling to follow protocol, she'd been grounded for the past 6 months after the Wraith's AI had rejected every synchronization attempt. Without a properly calibrated ship, she couldn't fly. Without her flying, the Empire's experimental combat division remained crippled. "There is one more candidate," Vexnar said carefully, "though I must warn you he is unconventional." "Unconventional how?" "He's human." Elsa's skin flickered through several colors before settling on deep purple, the Zorathian equivalent of surprise mixed with incredulity. "A human. Humans still use combustion engines for ground transport. Their most advanced AIs can barely calculate hyperspace trajectories. You expect a primitive." "Harry Chen," Vexnar continued, "holds 17 patents in quantum biological interface systems. He designed the neural bridges currently used in 70% of interspecies communication devices across the Galactic Federation, and he's requested specifically to work with the Stellar Wraith after reading about the incidents." Harry arrived the next morning in clothes that would have been considered informal even by human standards: worn boots, a jacket covered in tool holsters, and a datapad that looked ancient by galactic standards. He was tall for a human, with dark hair prematurely graying at the temples and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Elsa watched from the observation deck as he circled the Stellar Wraith, occasionally reaching out to touch its hull with bare hands, something that made the royal guards flinch. The living metal was notoriously reactive to foreign biologics. "He'll be dead or insane within an hour," she muttered to Vexnar. "Perhaps, but look." The Wraith's hull had begun to shimmer where Harry touched it, but not with the violent rejection it had shown previous engineers. Instead, the metal seemed curious, almost playful, rippling in response to his fingertips. Harry looked up suddenly, his gaze finding Elsa through the transparasteel observation window. Even from this distance, she could see him smile, not the diplomatic smile of someone trying to impress royalty, but the genuine expression of someone who'd just solved a fascinating puzzle. She found herself in the hangar before she'd consciously decided to move. "You're the human," she said, more statement than question. "Harry Chen," he replied, extending a hand in the human greeting gesture. When she didn't take it, he simply nodded. "And you're the wild princess everyone's talking about." Her skin flashed warning red. "I am Princess Elsa, heir to—" "I didn't mean it as an insult," Harry interrupted calmly. "From what I've read, You're the only pilot in the Empire who actually understands what this ship is trying to be. Everyone else treats it like a machine to be mastered. But you know better, don't you?" Elsa's defensive posture softened fractionally. The Wraith is alive in every way that matters. It thinks, it feels, it has preferences. Forcing it into rigid parameters is like trying to cage a star. Exactly. Harry turned back to the ship, running his hand along its flank. The problem isn't you or the ship. It's everyone trying to make the connection happen through brute force neural mapping. They're treating this like a hardware problem when it's actually a relationship problem. "And you can fix a relationship." Elsa's tone was skeptical. "No, but I can create the space where one develops naturally." He pulled a small device from his jacket. "This is a quantum state buffer. Instead of forcing your neural pattern onto the ship systems, it'll allow you both to meet in the middle, a shared quantum space where neither of you has to compromise your fundamental nature." "That's theoretically impossible. The processing power alone would require a human brain," Harry finished. "See, we might be primitive in a lot of ways, but our brains evolved to handle ridiculous amounts of parallel processing for social reasoning. I've adapted that architecture for quantum computing. The buffer uses principles your people haven't explored because your neural evolution went in a different direction." Over the next 3 weeks, Elsa found herself spending hours in the hangar, watching Harry work. He didn't calibrate the Wraith so much as negotiate with it. He'd spend entire days just observing how the ship's systems responded to different stimuli, taking notes in his archaic datapad, muttering to himself in Mandarin when he was particularly focused. "Why do you talk to it?" Elsa asked one evening, finding him sitting cross-legged on the Wraith's wing, apparently having a conversation with the hull. Harry didn't seem surprised by her presence. "Same reason I talk to you. Respect. Acknowledgement. The Wraith might not understand my words, but it understands intent. Every quantum system is observer-dependent. How we choose to observe matters." "That's surprisingly philosophical for an engineer." "My grandmother was a Zen Buddhist," Harry said with a shrug. "She taught me that forcing change never works as well as creating conditions where change wants to happen." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She would have liked you. She always said the wildest rivers carve the deepest canyons." Elsa felt her skin flush with colors she didn't quite understand. Not anger, not embarrassment, something else entirely. The breakthrough came during the 4th week. Harry had installed the quantum buffer and was running preliminary synchronization tests when the Wraith suddenly activated on its own. Its engines hummed to life, not with the violent surge of previous attempts, but with a sound almost like purring. "Elsa," Harry called, his voice carefully controlled. "I need you to approach slowly. Don't think about piloting, don't think about control, just introduce yourself." She walked toward the ship, her hand outstretched. When her fingers touched the hull, she felt it, a presence, vast and curious and utterly unique, reaching back. The neural connection formed not as an invasion but as an invitation. The quantum space Harry had created was unlike anything in Zorathian technology. It felt like floating in starlight, every thought and impulse visible but not judged, not filtered, just observed and understood. The Wraith's consciousness was there too, alien and beautiful, and for the first time Elsa felt truly seen. "Hello," she thought. "Hello," the Wraith responded, its consciousness warm with something like joy. When Elsa opened her eyes, she hadn't realized she'd closed them. She was in the cockpit, the ship's systems flowing around her like extensions of her own body. But she wasn't controlling the Wraith. They were moving together, two minds in perfect synchronization. Harry stood outside, his datapad forgotten, watching with an expression of pure wonder. The test flight lasted 3 hours. Elsa and the Wraith moved through maneuvers that had been theoretically impossible, the living metal reshaping itself instinctively in response to their shared intent. They didn't break any laws of physics, but they certainly bent a few, dancing through space in ways that made the tracking stations recalculate their instruments. When she finally landed, Elsa emerged from the cockpit to find the entire royal court waiting. Vexnar looked vindicated. The other engineers looked stunned. Harry just looked pleased, like he'd watched a friend succeed. "How did you do it?" Elsa asked him later, after the celebrations had died down. "How did you see what no one else could?" Harry considered the question, his human eyes thoughtful. "I think it's because I'm an outsider. Your people are brilliant, but you're used to quantum biological systems working a certain way. I had no preconceptions, no assumptions about how things should be. I just watched, listened, and tried to understand what the Wraith and you actually needed rather than what I thought you needed. That's impossibly simple." "The best solutions usually are," he smiled. "Besides, I've spent my whole life being underestimated. You develop a certain perspective when you're always the primitive human in the room. You learn that different doesn't mean lesser, just different." Elsa's skin shimmered with colors that in Zorathian culture indicated deep respect, and perhaps the beginning of friendship. "Will you stay? The Empire could use someone with your perspective." "I'm contracted for 6 more months," Harry said. "But after that, we'll see. I've got a few more impossible things I'd like to try." As the twin suns set over Zorath Prime, painting the crystalline spires in shades of amber and rose, Princess Elsa stood beside the human mechanic who had done the impossible. The stellar wraith hummed contentedly in its bay, finally understood, finally partnered with a pilot who saw it as it truly was. No one had been able to tame the wild princess. But then again, Harry Chen had never been trying to tame anything. He'd simply created the space where wildness and purpose could coexist, and in doing so, had changed the future of an empire. The impossible, it turned out, just required looking at the problem from an angle no one else had considered. Sometimes, all it took was a human perspective.